Okay, students, so let's go ahead and discuss Chapter 5, Lesson 4, Glory, War, and Decline. Let's go ahead and start with democracy in Athens. And I'm on page 186, and I'm looking at the second slide in your slideshow. The Athenians decided that they wanted a new type of government after um, the Persian Wars. So they wanted something different, and they decided, with the guidance of Pericles, their ruler, they decided that democracy was what was going to work. Now, in our country today, we still use democracy. We still have a democratic government, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But in Athens, they had direct democracy. That means that every single citizen of their city state took part in the decision making, on making the laws, on deciding new guidelines, on deciding what kind of buildings to have, on deciding what kind of punishment people should have, on how to spend their money. And they would all gather in the assembly, every single citizen. Now remember, citizens were males over 18 and they couldn't be slaves. Okay, so the women did not take part in this. And they would all gather in the assembly and debate and vote on all these different issues. Now, that sounded like a great idea, right? Everyone has a voice, everyone has a say in what was happening. However, what are some not so great things that you might think that would come up with that type of government? So imagine every single male over 18 years old that is not a slave took part in this. Can you imagine if that was happening in our country, where every single person would go and take part in debating? Imagine how many arguments people would have. They would take part in the voting. That would take forever. So um it was just too much eventually, and they had to figure out, what can we do to make this process faster and smoother. And so they kind of shifted towards representative democracy. And in representative democracy, the citizens vote for representatives, for people to go represent them in the government. For example, today we have representative democracy in our country. So we go and vote for a person to go represent us. So let's say we're voting for president. We are voting for a person to represent us as the United States of America. We vote for governors who go and decide what laws should pass. We vote for assemblymen and council members to be our voice in what kind of laws we need. Of course, we then end up voting for those laws, but they are the ones that represent us in the government. They are the ones that come up with solutions to the problems we may have. So we're not all gathered at the White House taking individual votes and debating back and forth. Can you imagine the millions and millions of people in our country? Because today women are citizens too. Can you imagine all these people at the White House voting? That would be chaos. So that's why we have representative democracy, where we choose our leaders who are representing us. So when you're old enough to vote, um, you are going to educate yourself on who our leaders are and who you want to vote for to represent you in our government. Let's go on to the next slide. So Pericles was the ruler in Athens after the Persian Wars, and he was the one that pushed for a democratic city-state. He was the one that said, you know what, we all need to have um, a say in our government. And he thought that even people that were farmers, even people that had less money, should take part in government and should have their voice heard. So he really wanted to improve the way that the Athenians ran their government. So he did a lot of great things for Athens. He had new temples, new buildings, he improved things. He also believed that we should support women and artists and teachers, and more importantly, philosophers, because the philosophers in Greek were great thinkers. People were no longer just thinking about war at this time, they were thinking about life. Someone who develops a philosophy, or someone who is a philosopher, is someone who thinks about life and why things are a certain way, and they think about reasons and explanations, besides just, oh, we're going to go to war against other city states and how are we going to make money. They're thinking about how to make life better, and how to improve people's ways of living and thinking. And they encouraged thinking, and they encouraged people to think beyond just war.